Today, we are asked to consider the cost of being a disciple of the Lord. What does it cost us? A wonderful example Jesus gives, that when you start to build something, you want to make sure you can finish it. I've experienced that in my life as a pastor, as we look at different things in parishes where I've been, always looking at, can we do what we want to do? Can we raise enough money to do what we want to do? Which is a different question than can we actually accomplish becoming a disciple here in our own personal lives? What is the cost of that? So I'd like to speak to you today about 4 saints who I consider to be very good disciples, and maybe to take a look at them from the context of what it is they gave up for the sake of the discipleship that God called them to do. Now, the first one to reflect on is one who lived a long time ago. And his feast day was actually yesterday. His name is Saint Gregory the Great. He lived back in the 500s or so. And so he came into being in the world during a period of great change. Huge changes were going on. In fact, the Roman Empire was no longer the strong empire that it was that kept peace all over the world. Oh, and certainly with a hard thumb and with a lot of violence. But nonetheless, there was a great deal of predictability on the part of people. They knew where their food was going to come from. They know who owned the land. And the barbarians up north were kept at bay. In the 500s, all that had crumbled, and the Roman Empire was no longer as strong as it was. In fact, the emperor himself didn't even live in Rome anymore. Now he lived in Constantinople, which is present-day Istanbul, Turkey. Gregory the Great, when he was 2 years old, his family would have gone through the first of the Black Deaths that happened in Europe. 1/3 of the population of Italy died from this plague. When he was made Pope by acclamation. But before he ever got there, he had a great deal of experience. He had a wonderful education. He came from a very wealthy family. His family owned a lot of land, and they had a great deal of power. In fact, that was an insight into how Rome had managed to even stay together in the 500s and 600s, was because of the wealthy families that kind of controlled the situation, because the government itself was totally inept in order to carry out things. So much of it had centralized outside of Rome, that now it had crumbled a great deal in terms of that kind of predictability that we expect from government. And one of the things he was done, the Pope in those days appointed him to be an ambassador to Constantinople. And so he went over there. He was a representative of the church to the emperor in Constantinople. So he had a great deal of experience in administration and bureaucracy and that sort of thing. But Gregory wanted to be a monk. That's what he wanted to do. He wanted to just stay in a monastery. He wanted to have a contemplative life, away from the busyness and the craziness of trying to run an institution. And so that's what he did. But he was called forth from that to become the Pope of the Church. And he had to give that up in order to become one of the greatest popes we ever had. Now, one of the things that actually we have from him today, it's kind of fun to kind of see what a pope a long time ago had an effect on us today. The structure of the Mass as we celebrate it today, had a number of changes throughout the centuries. One of the things that Pope Gregory, it's attributed to him, is the actual placement of the Our Father in our Mass, when it takes place, shortly before communion. It was Gregory the Great who put it there, and ever since he put it there, it stayed there. One of the things that Gregory had to do was he had to respond to the times. And the times were filled with a great deal of famine and disease, and so much so that he wanted all the resources of the church to be used for the poor. It is said that he dined with 12 poor people every single day when he had his meals. He also ordered his clergy to use the resources of their parishes and their churches in order to feed the poor. It was that bad in Rome in those days. Now, we also have to think about the fact that the church in those days, was one of those institutions that provided a great deal of stability. So it did that because it owned a lot of land. In fact, the Catholic Church in Rome owned 2,000 square miles of land around Rome. That's about 3 times the square miles of Cedar County. And he ordered all of the produce that was made on that land, that was produced on that land, to be not sold, but to be given to the poor during that period of time. So Pope Gregory is a first example. Because of him, the church became highly respected as an institution not only of learning, but of administration, of helping the poor, of dealing with the things that are around them and the problems that they have. The second one, the second saint to talk about, is Saint Gianna Beretta Molla. This is a saint that we don't hear too much about here in the United States. She hasn't become that popular among us, but she's one that really should become popular. She died in the year 1962 at the age of 39. St. Gianna became an obstetrician gynecologist. She was a double residency in Milan when she went through school. She opened a small clinic in a town that was near the town where she grew up. And in that clinic, she already practiced a great deal of charity by simply not charging those people who could not afford to have the treatments that she would give them. She loved delivering babies. In 1954, by the way, 1954 is a very, very good year, okay? Very good year. That's the year that she married Pietro Molla, also was the same year that I was born. But anyway, in that marriage, there came 3 children, one born in 56, one in 57, and one in 59. In 1961, in her fourth pregnancy, about 2 months into it, she experienced a great deal of pain. And so she went to the doctors, and the doctors did all the tests, and they found out that there was a tumor that was growing in her uterus along with the baby. The doctors gave her an option: abortion, hysterectomy, or the removal of that tumor. Now, the removal of the tumor was itself a very, very delicate and difficult operation. Would the baby be lost? Would she be lost? And so in the end, she chose that particular procedure. But it was no guarantee that things were going to work out in the end. But she chose that procedure because of her belief in that baby that she was carrying. That was the most important thing she could do, was to bring that baby into birth into the world. 7 days after she gave birth to that child, she died from peritonitis. It is said that she said many times to her husband in those days, that he is not to pause one bit about making the choice if he is asked. That is, to be the baby first. That's what was most important for her. Now, Gianna Emanuela was the girl that was born to her mother. And Gianna Emanuela today is just a wonderful, holy, holy woman. She has actually got her own degree in geriatrics. And she goes around and she gives talks. And one of the things that she talks about mainly is the love relationship between her mother and father, St. Gianna and St. Gianna's husband. And the fact that it's amazing that in St. Gianna's canonization, her own daughter, children, and husband were present at that canonization. Just an amazing thing in the history of our church. So one last comment about this. Gianna Emanuela came to Philadelphia a couple of years ago to speak to something on the family anyway in Philadelphia. And Pope Francis was here. And one of the services, Gianna was able to read a couple of the love letters that were from her mother to her father. So what did Gianna give up to be a disciple? She's a normal woman just like any other woman growing up in those days. She loved the things that women loved in those days. And she was very educated. But she was very, very faithful to her God. And today we honor her as a saint. The next one to think about is John Paul II. Now, these last 3 saints that I'm talking about are all saints that we've experienced in our lives. We've heard about, we've thought about, because we lived during their time. And John Paul II might get the title of great someday too. I encourage you to read a biography of him somewhere along the way. There's a couple good ones out, some short ones and some very long ones. But the one that I read, really showed some of the things that formed him in his life. One of which was the death of his mother when he was a small child, and then the death of his father when he was a young man before he was ordained a priest. The loss of his family, he had no brothers and sisters, really made it difficult for him. And he would, And during that period of time, during Nazi Germany as well as the communist times in Poland, he continued to call Mary, the Blessed Virgin Mary, his real mother then. And he did no longer have his own real mother with him. He no longer had his father with him. He formed a deep relationship with the Blessed Virgin Mary. And you know that as a world leader, he also contributed to the demise of the Soviet Union. But one of the things he should be known for mostly is his advocacy of family life itself, how important the family is in terms of the building block of society, how important marriage is, the love between two people, how important the relationship is that we have with Jesus. He would tell us from the very first day of his pontificate, do not be afraid. It's a phrase from Jesus himself. It's a phrase from the angels that appeared to Mary. Do not be afraid. In this world in which we live today, that still ends up becoming a very good piece of advice. After the assassination attempt on him, which he almost died from, he met with his assassin, and he forgave him. And it's a wonderful picture of him sitting in that metal chair, holding chair, wherever it was, in the prison cell with Aja, and talking. So John Paul II knew how much he needed God's forgiveness, and so he could forgive as well. The last one to talk about is the one who's being canonized today, Teresa Calcutta, Mother Teresa. What a forceful little woman she must have been. To go from just simply a call within a call, as she began her religious order and working with the poor. Now today that order is in 139 different countries in the world with thousands and thousands of followers. She started not only her religious order of women, but she also started a contemplative order and an order of men as well, the missionaries of charity. In the spring of 1976, she visited Omaha, Nebraska. She received an award at Boys Town. And during that time, it says in the World Herald, there's a nice little story about this, that she stayed with the Poor Clares. And the sister, I know her, the one who was the head of that community back then. She's retired now, naturally, but back then she was the head of the community. They wanted to, they were just all up, all tizzy, trying to make sure the place was just right to meet her, and bring her in and all that. And so she had this chair upholstered. So that sister, Mother Teresa, would have a really nice chair to sit in. She had it reupholstered with some gold fabric and whatever. And Mother Teresa came to the library with them to visit with just the community, a small community that was there. And they all started to sit down and whatever. And the superior asked her to be seated there. And Mother Teresa ended up kind of spinning her around and got her into that seat. And she sat in a little wooden chair. The rest of them had a good laugh at that. Here they were preparing for her so well. One of the things about Mother Teresa that I want to mention is this dark night of the soul. In her writings published after her death, it became clear to us that she lived a very, very difficult interior life. Many, many saints go through this, where the exterior life of them seems very, very holy and happy and directed and doing God's will, and yet interiorly they have no consolation whatsoever. She carried within herself truly the cross of Jesus Christ. Early on in her spiritual life, she prayed that she could join Jesus suffering on the cross. And Jesus granted her that prayer. Because she felt huge abandonment inside, she used words like God seemed absent, heaven was empty, and her own suffering seemed to count for nothing. And despite all of this, she continued to love and lead her community and serve the poor. What did she give up? She didn't really give up as much as she took on. She knew that God was still faithful. She trusted God, even though she felt nothing about it interiorly. None of the high kind of feeling consolations that come in our spiritual lives. So all of these saints give us examples, something we can kind of emulate, something we can look at in our own lives. But one of the little things that I think kind of speaks to us is that Mother Teresa and John Paul II and Gianna and whatever, what would there be advice to us today? I think to put it in my own words, take care of business. In other words, take care of business. Do what you can do. In a conversation Teresa had with a lady who had started an AIDS kind of clinic and working with children with AIDS, was setting up a number of clinics and places of health there in India. And so she came to visit Mother Teresa, and she was telling her all about what she's doing for all of these children. Well, Mother Teresa, you already had a conversation with her, about her life and her family and all this sort of thing, and her children. And so she thought she was kind of tooting her horn, and Mother Teresa would say, oh, you're doing wonderful work, wonderful work. And she didn't say that. This is what she said. She said to her, take care of your own children. Take care of your own children. In other words, don't forget your own children. They are your prime responsibility. And she received that message wholeheartedly from Mother Teresa. Did some rebalancing perhaps in her own life. But what is Mother Teresa telling you and telling me? Take care of the vocation that God has given you right here and now, whatever it is. As a single person, it means doing what you can to contribute to the life of the community. As a married person, it means taking care of your spouse, taking care of your kids. Do that well, love them well, and you will be a good disciple. Each of these people that we talked about here never stop loving Jesus. When we love one another and take care of business, we are loving Jesus.